Florida shakes again. Workers with legal papers trapped in a crackdown no one saw coming. You are about to see a scene that flips the script completely. A group of landscaping workers, men who showed up to work before sunrise like they do every day, ended up cuffed on the sidewalk even after proving they had valid documents. No confrontation, no chaos, just an operation that moved fast and hit families like a hammer. And tonight, one detail breaks the air. Even with paperwork in order, one of them, Vicky Bedell, was taken away. His wife says she spoke with him minutes before everything happened. She heard the fear in his voice. She never imagined that following every rule wouldn't be enough. If you want reporting that cuts through the noise, subscribe right now, turn on alerts, and stay here. What you're about to hear matters for every family trying to build a life in the United States. The sidewalk in the southern counties of Florida felt like a pressure valve exploding. Landscaping trucks stopped in the middle of residential streets. Workers asked to step out, officers directing everything with precision. The kind of operation that doesn't warn, doesn't explain, doesn't tremble. People filming from porches, phones shaking in their hands, neighbors murmuring the same question. Why them? The tension didn't come from flashing lights. It came from the faces of workers who knew they had done everything this country asked of them. Permits renewed, check-ins up to date, paperwork carried in small plastic folders to avoid damage from rain or sweat. None of that mattered the moment the operation began. Vicky Bedell, one of the men detained, had spoken to his wife earlier that morning. She said the conversation felt normal until he suddenly lowered his voice. Something in the tone shifted. A truck stopped. Officers approached. She heard him inhale sharply and then silence. For a family that had followed every step by the book, that silence hit like a breaking wave. She now says her home feels suspended, like the walls are listening for news that refuses to come. She stays anonymous out of fear, out of the simple instinct of keeping her children safe. She repeats the same line over and over. We did everything according to the law of this country. But the scene of her husband being escorted away keeps replaying in her mind like a loop she can't escape. Meanwhile, the workers weren't caught in anything that resembled wrongdoing. They were doing landscaping jobs, cutting grass, trimming trees, loading branches, the routine that keeps entire neighborhoods looking alive. But on that day, their work uniforms were not protection. They were a target. Officers from the State Highway Patrol and federal border agents operated together. That joint presence sent a message without needing a speech. Every stop could turn into something bigger, and even those waiting for immigration appointments, even those with valid work permits, were swept into the same net. One of the detained workers had a minor traffic infraction in his past. Nothing violent, nothing serious, a ticket already paid. But in the current climate, even a past mistake that legally closed still echoes in ways that push families into panic. The attorney representing one of the detainees didn't hide frustration. He said leaders promised the operations would focus on individuals posing real danger. But the reality on the ground is something else entirely. His voice tightened when he said the system is now catching workers who contribute, workers who pay taxes, workers who are simply trying to keep their children covered, fed, and safe. But the most alarming part is not the detentions themselves. It's the message underneath. Even if you follow every rule, even if you carry all valid documents, even if your record is essentially clean, you can still be taken. That is what has families whispering quietly in their living rooms tonight. That is what has entire crews of workers questioning whether showing up tomorrow could turn into something they can't undo across Florida. The so-called agreement that allows state officers to collaborate in immigration procedures has become a silent engine. It runs every day, powering decisions that reshape families in minutes, and most residents don't even know it exists. It began more than a decade ago and continues expanding its reach while political speeches claim otherwise. When officers stop any vehicle, the line between a routine check and something life-altering becomes dangerously thin. What happened to these workers demonstrates that the gap between policy announcements and field actions is widening, and the people standing in the middle of that gap are regular families. Neighbors who recorded the detentions said what disturbed them most was the calmness. Not chaos, not confrontation. Just workers being guided, cuffed, placed near trucks, looking down because eye contact felt pointless. A kind of quiet that speaks even louder than sirens. What's happening now is not just an immigration issue, it's a social fracture, a signal that entire communities built around hard work and stability are living with constant uncertainty. A reminder that even when individuals comply with everything, rules can shift under their feet without warning. Families across the state are asking the same question tonight. Asterisk, if following the law isn't enough, then what is? Asterisk, and that is only the surface. The deeper layer is the psychological weight. Children waiting for a parent to come home. Spouses refreshing their phones even at dawn. People who now drive to work feeling a pulse rising every time a patrol car appears in the rearview mirror. This is not about a single operation. It's about the fear that spreads after it. The woman married to one of the detained workers said something that cuts deeper than any legal explanation. We are not people of harm. That sentence, simple and raw, captures the entire emotional core of this situation. She is not arguing politics. She is pleading for logic, for fairness, for consistency, and still, today, her husband remains held, and still, she does not know what will happen tomorrow, and still, hundreds of families across Florida understand this could happen to them too. The weight of this situation grows heavier, because nothing about these workers matched the public narrative used to justify crackdowns. They were not hiding, they were not evading, they were not involved in anything that threatened anyone. They were simply working. Yet the operation treated them as if they were shadows slipping through the cracks of the system, instead of people who had been standing fully in the light. Becky Bedell's wife described the moment officers approached. She says he tried to tell them he had his documents with him, that his work permit was valid, that he had an active immigration process pending. None of that altered the outcome. She remembers his voice fading as if the world had suddenly pressed mute. She says she knew something was wrong the exact moment he said her name with a tone he had never used before, a tone between disbelief and resignation. There is something deeply unsettling about detaining a worker who has followed every rule. It challenges the expectation that compliance equals safety. That is the belief many immigrants hold on to, not because they are naive, but because it is the only stable rule they have control over. Do everything by the book, and you should make it home. But that unwritten agreement cracked open on that Florida sidewalk. The other workers surrounding him felt the air shift. Some had pending documents. Some had renewals processing. Some were still waiting for interview notices. All of them understood two things instantly. The paperwork they carried in their pockets was not armor, and the system they trusted did not pause to consider context. When officers began placing handcuffs on their wrists, you could see confusion in their eyes more than fear. That confusion is what keeps many families awake tonight. How do you explain to a child that their parent did nothing wrong, followed every rule, paid every fee, and still ended up taken away? How do you reassure them when you no longer understand the rules yourself? The contrast between political speeches and street-level operations is widening. Leaders say the focus is on dangerous individuals. Neighborhoods are seeing something completely different. Landscaping workers, restaurant workers, construction workers, people heading to appointments, people delivering orders, people who have spent years complying with every request from the government. Detention doesn't just exist in the moments of detention. It spreads long after officers leave. Co-workers call each other. Text messages circulate. Families lock their doors earlier. People drive slower. Others avoid highways entirely. The sense of vulnerability climbs every day, especially for those who believed their documents placed them on the safe side of the line. Becky Bedell's wife keeps replaying the final phrases he said before disconnecting. She said he tried to reassure her, even as officers surrounded him. He told her to stay calm. He told her to take care of the kids. She said his voice was steady, but she could feel the tremor underneath. You cannot hide that kind of tremor from someone who shares a life with you. Tonight she does not know when she will see him again. Across Florida, similar stories unfold quietly. Workers are building gardens, fixing roofs, repairing fences, maintaining parks. They are part of the daily fabric of the state. Yet the fear that they could be stopped, questioned, and taken changes how they move through a normal day. This is not an isolated event. It is a shift that forces families to live in a constant state of alert, a shift that exposes how fragile life becomes when decisions occur far from the communities they impact, a shift that turns silence into a warning sign. The operations happening now do not rely on dramatic raids. They rely on routine traffic stops, a broken taillight, a rolling stop, a brief highway check. The simplest interaction can escalate instantly when the officers involved have authority to expand the scope of the stop. Families across the state are realizing that even the smallest detail can trigger a chain of events that they cannot stop once it begins. Neighbors, who recorded the scenes, said something revealing. The workers did not resist, did not question aggressively, did not try to run or argue. They complied because many immigrants are taught from day one that compliance protects them. But on that Florida sidewalk, compliance did not prevent the cuffs. And that is the turning point of this story. The idea that following the rules is enough is collapsing. This collapse is what fuels fear. It reshapes trust. It creates invisible barriers between communities and local authorities. It dissolves the sense of belonging that immigrants work for years to build. When people see that doing everything correctly still leads to dissension, they begin to question whether anything they do can ever be enough. Workers whose lives revolve around early mornings and exhausting shifts now wake up not only to earn a living but to navigate a landscape filled with uncertainty. They carry water bottles, tools, lunchboxes, and now constant anxiety. Anxiety that does not leave their bodies even when the workday ends. Attorneys argue that these operations undermine the logic of the immigration system itself. They point out that individuals awaiting hearings, renewals, and asylum interviews are following the law to the letter. Detaining them destabilizes entire families who are already inside formal legal processes. But the message on the street is clearer than any legal statement. You can have every document in place, and still, it might not matter. This realization is now pushing many families to whisper more often than speak. They avoid saying too much on the phone. They avoid certain streets. They double-check routes. The fear doesn't silence them because they have something to hide. It silences them because they are tired of feeling punished for obeying the rules. And in this environment, the story of these workers becomes more than a single event. It becomes a mirror, a reflection of what thousands experience quietly across the country. A reminder that vulnerability doesn't come from illegality. It comes from unpredictability. At this moment, the wife of Becky Bedell waits for any update. She says she still believes in fairness. She still believes that doing things correctly should count for something. But each hour that passes without answers chips away at that belief. This is the reality families are living tonight. A reality defined not by wrongdoing, but by uncertainty. A reality where the difference between going home and being taken can unfold in seconds. A reality where even workers with valid permits are not shielded. And that reality forces one final question to echo loudly across Florida. If the rules no longer protect those who follow them, what does protection even mean now? Across Florida, these scenes repeat. Men and women sitting at kitchen tables, staring at forms, letters, and permits that once symbolized progress. They now symbolize unpredictability. People who built their lives on the idea that complying with the rules kept them safe are reorganizing their entire understanding of what safety means. Many immigrants follow a quiet routine: work, home, paperwork, appointments, patience. They wait years for a chance to stabilize their status. They save money to pay every fee on time. They check their mailboxes every evening. They refresh online portals. They do everything right because that is the only path available. This channel exists to break the noise, expose what is happening behind the scenes, and bring clarity where confusion is the norm. If you want truth without filters, if you want reporting that cuts straight through the fog, if you want analysis that refuses to repeat what everyone else says, then stay here. ***, subscribe now. Turn on alerts. ***, this platform does not bend. It does not soften. It does not copy anyone. It tells you what others avoid saying. And before we close, here's the final message, the one Florida needs to hear tonight. Families should not live afraid of the system they are trying to respect. Workers should not be treated like they are disposable. Compliance should mean something, and fairness should not be negotiable. If these values collapse, everything collapses with them. Stay alert. Stay informed. Stay prepared.